Morning, everybody. You can sit wherever you want. There are no assigned seats in this room. Hope everybody's doing well. It's certainly a beautiful day today. It's nice and rainy and making everything grow. It's good to see the seasons change like that. It's going to be cold next week. Colder, I should say. We are in the book of 2 Kings, and we're going to finish up chapter 3 today. I think we're going to get into chapter 4. Just to recap, we're in the section where Elijah has already died. Ahab has died. Ahaziah, his son, has died. And Elisha has taken over, and he's kind of in this phase where he's showing God's power and his double portion of Elijah's spirit. So we're going to see him do a lot of what Elijah did. There's a lot of parallels in the things that Elijah did through miracles, with miracles, and what he does as well. So somewhere along the line, because we know that he has this double portion, in my mind, I'm to believe that he does have this double portion. Now, Jehoram is the king now of Israel, the northern kingdom. And Moab, we talked about this last week, Moab has stopped sending their tribute of 100,000 goats or lambs, and then 100,000 woolly sheep, and all of this gigantic tribute that they supposedly could afford. When you look at the historical documents, the land on that side was very rich. But because of that rebellion, Jehoram asks Jehoshaphat, hey, can you go with me over there to fight Moab? And that makes perfect sense because Jehoshaphat had defeated Moab in their own land. Moab came across the Dead Sea, and they routed them. Basically, there was no fight whatsoever. We saw, and this is basically essentially two approaches by two kings. One king who relies on God, that was Jehoshaphat. We read that in 2 Chronicles. And this other king, Jehoram, who doesn't like God at all. He is smart enough to get rid of the Baals, and we talked about that last week. He got rid of the Baals because Azariah, or Amaziah, Ahaziah, all these Zayas, I'm telling you, driving me nuts. Ahaziah was looking to ask the Baals about his condition because he fell through the lattice, and he ends up dying. So apparently he kind of lost some of his faith in the Baals. It's interesting to see that because Jezebel is still there. So we're going to see this. We're going to see Jezebel come up eventually. So all of these things are happening, and so Jehoshaphat agrees to go to war with Moab again, and that, which is interesting in and of itself. And he actually makes the plan to go through Edom, and they actually take the king of Edom with them. And I'm assuming when they say the king of Judah goes and the king of Edom goes, they're probably bringing at least an entourage of soldiers with them, if not a complete army. But I have some questions about this, and we're going to get into that. So before we begin, let's have a word of prayer. Holy Father, we're so grateful for this beautiful day you've given to us. We're so thankful, especially for the beauty of your Son, Jesus, and it shows and reveals your love to us. And we're so thankful for this word that it reveals all those good things for us. We hope and pray, Lord, that all things said and done today would be pleasing to you. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, so that kind of catches us up. So they're on their way. these three kings and the Israelite army, at least the Israelite army is there. There's probably some other guys there representing these other kings. I doubt that they would leave without some kind of protection. And they're on their way for about 7 days, and the water runs out. And so, like I was saying earlier, we see these two reactions. We talked about this last week. One, the king of Israel is just distraught. He's like, oh, God brought us out here to destroy us. And Jehoshaphat goes, he says the same thing. Isn't there like a guy from God that we can ask? He keeps doing that. So we see Jehoshaphat intervene again, like he did with Ahab. I mean, isn't there somebody who can talk to God? I mean, instead of what you're doing, because it's not working. And so my main question is, and we don't have to answer it right away, but my main question is why does Jehoshaphat say yes to this? God was angry with him when he made an alliance with Ahab. He was angry with him when he made an alliance with Ahaziah, looking to send these ships over to Tarsus or whatever, Tarshish. That's really easy to say, Tarshish. But anyway, God's not happy with him these 2 times, and here again, this 3rd time, we see, the request of Israel for the help of Judah, and he agrees. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Okay?
Well, I read that Israel was probably more powerful than Judah.
Oh, yeah.
They were maybe subservient to him, so they weren't in a position to refuse to go with him.
Okay.
I just read that, I don't know.
That's interesting. Although I will say this, when we read in, I think it's in the Chronicles, the armies of Jehoshaphat, the people loved him so much because he had his mind directed toward God. They had like 1 million soldier army available to them. I don't think they took these people with them. But that's a good point. And when you look at the landmass of who ran what, Israel's landmass was so much larger. Everything on east of the Jordan belonged to them. So this land where Moab is, they had taken over pretty much control of it. That's why they were getting the tribute. So this was kind of their fight. This was their landmass. When God gave these 10 tribes over to Israel, in the days of Jeroboam and his mess up, that included east of the Jordan. So that could very well be. Israel may have just been a very much more powerful army, and it could have been that he thought, well, I better just do this. Any other reasons? Aaron and then Gary.
Well, they're related,
Okay.
You have to remember it's one nation that's split, right? But it's one people still. And so I would think that would be the main reason.
Yes.
They're kinsmen. And he's willing to help, but he's also willing to hear what God's will is. Both. So he's there, but he's also looking at turning to God always.
Right. Yeah, and I can't read his mind, but he seems like a guy who, he wants Israel to be united. I think he really wants that. But I think the issue was from that first part with Ahab, he doesn't consult God. Gary, did you have something?
Not anything really different. That's what I was going to say. He said that the first time, hey, we're brothers. My horses are your horses,
My horses
so
are
forth.
your
He seemed to
horses.
really love the ideal of unity within they're related, like Aaron said. He seemed to focus on that quite a bit.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Yeah, the writer is I think all of those things are part of this mix. There's so many nuances that aren't really spelled out. The writer doesn't go into detail of developing characters a whole lot, not like some modern day fiction writers. But he gives us enough clues to see, and this is another one of those spinning plates that I've been talking about. This is one of those things in the background happening. I just talked about Jezebel. Well, what's the big deal about Jezebel? Well, Jezebel and Ahab had a daughter, and she's living within the king's realm in Judah. Okay, Athaliah. She's married. There's a marriage covenant, and this reminds me of the people who fooled Israel early on when they came into the land, and I think it was Gibeah maybe, or I could be wrong there, but they dressed in old clothes and had old wine bags and showed up and said, "Oh, we've come a long way. We're not going to hurt you. Let's make a covenant." And they trick Israel into making this covenant. Well, and so it was a horrible covenant because God didn't want them to have a covenant with these people. Because you have to honor the covenant. And here's this covenant that Jehoshaphat has with the house of Ahab. So that is that spinning plate in the background and all those other reasons. I really do think that, in my mind, I don't think Jehoshaphat was looking to do anything against God. When we see in Chronicles all those things he instituted, he wants to please God. He is so God-focused. I'm just, when I read about him, I am so impressed. So yeah, it's that spinning plate back in the background where you have evil influence through a covenant that he can't do anything about. And that is the reason, in my mind, why God was so upset with him. It's like, you can't back out of this. You've made the deal, and now you have to live with it. So he agrees to go. And I'm not saying he only did it because he was compelled. I think he loved those people as well. So he's going to do it, even though he probably knows God isn't going to be happy about it, but he has to honor the covenant that he has. And Athaliah is back in there. Okay, anything about anything up until this point? Yes, Gary.
I just want to say one thing about unity. It sounded like he was focused on unity. But God did say that when you brought up the way he worded it, how can you be friends with my enemy?
Right.
And Israelites were God's enemy because they were so much into idolatry. They were sinful. They were in a sinful place. Jehoshaphat didn't seem to be in a sinful place. And yeah, that's not God's unity. That's all I wanted to say. That's why God was upset with him.
I have something written down about that right here in my notes, because there's a big lesson there, not just for Jehoshaphat, right, who had to now deal with this issue in his life moving forward with God, but there's a lesson in there for the Christian, isn't there? I mean, is there sin in the world today? Is there idolatry in the world today? See a lot of heads shaking. Yes, it's rampant. We've talked about this. It's rampant today. And I think a lot of us older people look at the world and go, well, things have really changed. The moral character of our country, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about this corporate view that God is now looking at this nation. We look at it and we go, the moral character of our country has just gone downhill. It's in the trash can right now. What happened? What happened? Did it just happen in one day? Did we just wake up one day and everything was different? I mean, I think everybody would agree. Everything is incremental. Everything is just little baby steps. In my own mind, one of the thrust of the removal of God from the minds and hearts of people has been this theory of evolution, and we don't need to argue what it is or anything like that. I really don't care. But it's been around 164 years or so, or something like that. And it was just a theory to begin with that turned into leverage for people to remove God out of their life and feel okay about it. And then what was the next step after that? Well, not only are we going to not only am I going to remove God out of my life, but everybody else that doesn't remove God out of their life, I'm going to remove any power from them. I'm going to make fun of them. We're going to mock them. We're going to say, "Oh, do you pray to the sky daddy? Do you believe in Santa Claus too?" So that is the incremental steps that we see sin take place. It's just little steps. And that's why we see God being so upset with Jehoshaphat. Okay, verses 20 through 27 of chapter 3. So, here's the battle, and this is a very interesting thing that happens here. Moab has been rebelling, and we've got these three kings, including Edom, and I had the map up there last week. I don't have it this week. But Edom is like right next, if you go around under south of the Dead Sea, Edom is like going around that way up to Moab on the other side. Edom and Moab are neighbors, that's my point. So all of these little nuances are happening politically as well. We need to think about all of these different things. So let's read that. It happened in the morning about the time of offering the sacrifice, and behold, the water came by the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water. Okay, so there's the water that God provided. Elisha prophesied this would happen. God's going to give you water, and he's going to give you victory. So they were okay. So here's the water. Now all the Moabites heard that the kings had come up to fight against them, and all who were able to put on armor and older were summoned and stood on the border. So here's their whole army. They rose early in the morning, and the sun shone on the water, and the Moabites saw the water opposite them as red as blood. Then they said, "This is blood. The kings have surely fought together, and they have slain one another. Now, therefore, Moab, to the spoil." I know it's not funny, because this is really serious stuff. But we have to, why are they thinking this? And we'll get to that. Why are they thinking this way? But when they came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites arose and struck the Moabites so that they fled before them. And they went forward into the land and slaughtering the Moabites. Thus they destroyed the cities, and each one threw a stone on every piece of good land and filled it. And if you've ever tried to farm something, you would know what a big deal that is. So they stopped all the springs of water and felled all the good trees until in Keharasheth only left its stones. However, the slingers went about and struck it. When the king of Moab saw that the battle was too fierce for him, he took with him 700 men who drew the swords to break through to the king of Edom. But they could not. Then he took his oldest son, who was to reign in his place, and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. And there came great wrath against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. Wow. Okay, so there's the battle. Moab musters up everybody. They look down where the Israelites are. I'm assuming it was down. And they see the water that God had provided in those troughs that they dug, and it was all reflective. and they say, oh, it's blood. They all killed each other. They were fighting. They don't like each other at all. Let's just go plunder them. Why would they think that? Gary. That's exactly what happened before. That's what happened before. We read that in 2 Chronicles. However, the approach was a lot different. We saw the people uniting around God. The people, Jehoshaphat calls everybody, including babies and everybody, just whoever, just bring everybody here, and they all started praying. And then we saw that once the army started to march, they inquire of God, and once the armies start to march, God told them, you go over to the ascent of Ziz, and you just make your stand, and you won't have to fight. And that's what happened. They were singing praises to God as they got to their spot. That to me is just incredible. They're singing, this spiritual hymn. They put them in the front of the row, in front of everybody, and when they get there, everybody had already killed themselves. And the place was obviously red with blood, just like this. And they said, well, to the spoil. Just exactly what these guys are thinking. They're thinking their God is going to, these are battles of gods in their minds. And because they think they have a God, and they don't, unfortunately for them. And this is what they were thinking. Oh, well, our God is taking revenge on that Jehovah God, and we can just go pick up all their stuff like they did with us. It took them 3 days. It took Judah 3 days to get all the spoils. And of course, on the way back, they thank God and dedicate a valley for it and all this stuff. Okay. So, really quick. Well, we'll get into that later. But the question is, 3:27. Who had great indignations? I don't know where Barry was with this when he asked this question. And then, and therefore departed from him. It says, it talks about, he took his oldest son, who was to reign in his place. So this is a big deal. Okay? This is the heir to the throne, quite literally. And offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. That's just horrible. And there came great wrath against Israel. And they departed from him and returned to their own land. So what is this? Who had the great indignations, and because of that they departed from him? Who's the him? Okay, interesting. Okay, well, I would think so. Oh, that's very interesting. You know what? I didn't even go there, but that's a great thought. Maybe his own people felt like, what are you doing? This is the next guy in line. You're leaving us without an heir. Wow. That's a great point. Okay?
I bet it might have been God.
Okay. God had great indignation. Well, I think we know that's probably true anyway because of, this was a last-ditch sort of thing that a king might do in that day. And it was done, it was basically a way of asking for mercy, which kind of worked here. That's a great point, Aaron. I didn't even think of that. That could very well be it. Maybe his own people just thought so little of their king, they left him because he had the whole army there, what was left of them. Okay. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Any other thoughts? Steve, did you have one? Or Gary, Aaron? Oh, Gary, sorry.
Just taking a mind that is able to sacrifice your son.
Say it again.
A the evil mind that it takes, I guess it's towards his God, or,
More than likely, yeah.
but to sacrifice your son, how far Satan or evil can get in people's hearts.
Yeah. I don't know if that would be part of a Baal worship, but certainly a Moloch, Molech sort of thing. We know that that religion required having your children to be burned. Steve, did you have something? Yes, they did learn.
I
from
didn't want
this.
to spoil your what you got coming on that, but Manasseh's king, his reign, and let's see, just the same king, Joram, I guess, Jehoram from the Israel. What did he do? He tore his clothes and then the Egyptians, or whoever was attacking them, had them under siege for the time there in chapter 6, 7.
Yeah.
They heard something and ran away in the same way. So they assumed that it was some danger to them. And those two guys, with the two lepers or whoever they were, just picked up all the spoils.
Yeah, right. And that was, again, in that story we have the lepers getting all this stuff is just God using the least likely of people. And it's that's God's message throughout everything. Jesus himself, the least likely of anybody who would be, who are you? Does anything good come from Nazareth? I like to make that term a lot because, well, yeah, the Savior of the world. How about that? It's just our own perceptions could be so far off of all of that. It's all of this is, to me, when I looked at the indignations, I thought it was, because when you look at that word indignation, it could mean more than just being angry or wrath. It could just mean just you're just pleased with the moment. And it could be within the ranks of even Israel, they just could have looked at that and just thought, this is way over the top. I don't think that this indignation against Israel is the way it's put. It doesn't mean that everybody necessarily, that they were all angry at Israel, as much as it could mean that even within the ranks of Israel itself, between them, they were divided about what they saw, because that's what that indignation could mean. It just means splintering off. So, a lot of times when these are interpreted, it's kind of, you have to look at the context. So at that point, I see the will to continue on the fight. It just goes away. And I think they're done at that point. That was my thought on it. So I just wanted to note something. Is there anything about the 700 men? What is the king doing there? What is he doing in this story? The king of Moab gets 700 swordsmen. So these are obviously going to be the ninjas, right? These are the guys who know how to fight the best. And what does he do? Where's he going? He's trying to get to the king of Edom. Why is he doing that? If you're this king and you see that you're losing, why would you go after the king of Edom? Aaron?
Well, if you can kill the king, you might turn
change the momentum of the battle.
There you go.
And when the people lose their king, again, they're going to be disheartened. And so that It's a strategic
It is a very strategic.
move, and so they're concentrating forces to kill one person
Yeah.
to try to change the overall outcome.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. He's looking at the weak link. Not only is he looking at the weak link, Edom is his neighbor. And the only reason I bring this up is this was a big deal to ask Edom to do this. You know, really. Because Edom borders Moab, and they're related. All of these people are related. The Israelites are related to these people in one way or another, way back when. And here they are. Here is Jehoram leveraging his association with Jehoshaphat to use Edom. Poor Edom. I say poor Edom, but I don't know. It's probably very simple, but their army probably wasn't really big. It probably wasn't very strong. Everybody feared Jehoshaphat's army. You read that in Chronicles. Everybody feared that God. Everyone feared that God. So he's looking for the weak link. He sees Edom. He probably has a bone to pick with him already because this is his neighbor. He goes right after him. You kill that king, and not only will the Edomites probably stop fighting, but they may even turn. You made us do this, and now look what happened. There's all of those things could have happened. I think it was actually a very good strategic move. It just couldn't work because God was against them. Steve.
What's going on now? Esau was the father of the Edomites, really.
Right.
And I mean, they settled some things, but then I don't think they really settled when they met. And okay, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, they were descendants of Esau, and this was all pretty much prophesied that this would be like this. And of course, Moab and Ammon were the descendants of Lot. And so, yeah, these people are all related, but by this time, you know, the relationship is kind of like, well, we're nations now. We're dealing with something different. It's not like when Abraham and Lot were around and they were just big families, you know, maybe 70 or 100 or 300 people. I think Abraham had 300 people, something like that. Okay, any observations or anything else about this? Okay, so chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4, we're going to kind of get away from battles and things. We're going to get more into Elisha and some of the things that he's doing, more miracles. I was thinking about miracles. We'll get into it, but I was thinking about the bears attacking those boys. And I wanted to say that was a miracle because I think God made it happen, or the angel or whoever made it happen, I don't know. But that's not a miracle. A bear attacking somebody is not a miracle. A miracle has to be something that's supernatural. But I do think it was of God, and we'll get into some of that in a little bit. Verses 1 through 7. 1 through 7. So this widow comes to Elisha asking him for help, and here's another parallel to Elijah. Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves." So that was normal. If somebody lent you money and they couldn't pay you back, maybe they would come take your children as payment or something. Now, what was against the law was surety, which was, let me rephrase that, interest. Okay, so there might have been some issues with this in the law, but this is what is happening. Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" And she said, "Your maidservant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil. Then he said, go borrow vessels at large for yourself from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not get a few. And you shall go in and shut the door behind you and your sons and pour out into all these vessels, and you shall set aside what is full. So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, and they were bringing the vessels to her, and she poured. And we kind of have to put ourselves into this situation. There's this village of people, and, if you got any pots? Well, I've got 7 pots over here. Well, I need them all. Your neighbor comes, you need some cream or sugar, or, like today. But no, I just need all your pots. And so you're gathering all these pots. It's very interesting to think. She poured. Okay, verse 6. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, bring me another vessel. And he said to her, there is not one vessel more. And the oil stopped. Then she came and told the man of God and said, go sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons shall live on the rest. So obviously there was a lot of oil. So this is a miracle. This is a supernatural thing that's happening. It's not just bears coming out of the woods and tearing people up. So I think one of the things that when I read this for me is I automatically go back to Elisha saying, I want double your portion, Elijah. So now we're seeing these parallel sort of miracles, right? Because Elijah did the same thing. He goes off, God sends him to different places, and he has to live with this widow woman. She has a little meal and a little oil, and Elijah says, get me some water. She gets some water. She says, he needs something to eat. Get me something to eat. She says, I have enough to feed my son and myself, and then we're dead. And that's it. We're going to die. And then he says, well, go ahead and make it for me, and then don't worry about it. And what happens there is a little bit different, where the oil and the meal never run out of those 2 specific pots or containers. And in this case, with Elisha's miracle, this woman probably has a flask of oil only. It's called a pot. You can think of, a pot. Well, we use pots to plant. It's probably a flask. There's 2 different words that's used here. And when Elisha tells her to go get these, whatever, it's basically anything that can hold something. It's not just pots. It's anything. Could be anything. Could be a wineskin. Could be anything. So that's what she does. So there are similarities and parallels of these 2 things, and we see Elisha demonstrating, or God demonstrating through Elisha, that he is getting that double portion, in my mind anyway. So my question is, if you put yourself in this woman's position, obviously she's in dire straits. Her sons are. You have this issue. Your husband borrowed money, and now he's dead. And the only way to pay it back is going to be with the help of your sons, more than likely, in the sense that they can make a living and you can pay them back. Maybe there was an issue. Obviously there was an issue because they had to borrow anyway. So here's this prophet telling you need to borrow more. You need to borrow more pots. Now you're going to owe everybody. If I'm that woman, that's what I'm thinking. Now I'm going to owe everybody in the village, all my neighbors. And he's telling her, you need to do this. And she just does it. So what does that say about her faith? I mean, if you are that woman and you're doing this, if you're that person doing these things, What does that say about your faith? Do you know this is going to work? Steve?
Connect this to Joseph and the Pharaoh. I think, when he said, you need to store up what you're reaping during this time of good, and that kept them through the time that was bad. I like the skinny. There's cows came to the edge of the Nile River,
Right.
and they were sleek, and they were for the purpose, and they were using them up as soon as they came, and it came. But Joseph had now the opportunity to interpret the Pharaoh's prayer that they would be rescued through this idea of saving that's how they connected the nation together again.
Okay. Now, I love that story. That is a good story of faith. And the reason why, and it translates into this story, the reason why Pharaoh believed him is because it made sense. Because he was looking for this interpretation, right? He's looking for the interpretation of the dream. And here's this guy in jail. Think of that one. That's another story of faith right there. A guy in jail comes and tells you what the interpretation is, but it is so meaningful. And I would say this likely as well, that Joseph had a good reputation from Potiphar. Potiphar would have had him killed if he believed his wife. I don't think he believed his wife, and I think it was Joseph's good reputation that not only saved him, but he was able to later reveal God to somebody, and that is why Pharaoh believed him. And in this sense, much the same way, we have Elisha, who's already been proving himself, telling this woman what to do, and she does it. Okay.
Well, this situation shows the deterioration of the way God set things up in Deuteronomy, because there should have been a family redeemer
Okay.
to save her from this situation.
True.
But this has all gone out of the window, more or less.
Much like in the case of Ruth, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Where we see Boaz step forward. And I think even in the case of Ruth, though, we see that people were reluctant. Boaz has to convince the guy who's next in line to redeem the property. Say, well, by the way, you can redeem this property with Naomi and everything, but you got to take this wife. He's like, wow, wait a minute, I already have. I don't know. I don't want to risk, the inheritances of my family already. No, you take it. Go ahead. And then they take their shoes off and shake or whatever they did, something like that. So redeeming is supposed to happen. And I agree, this is supposed to happen. But it wasn't happening. And it could be they just didn't know. Because we're like you say, we're in such a deteriorated state. It's not like they're reading, it's not like they're reading scripture every day or necessarily reading the law, because if they read the law, they'd end up going back to Jerusalem. Okay, anything else? Okay. So we're going to start at verse 8 next week. And I have a question concerning faith and miracles, and I think everybody knows it, but just be ready to go over that, about faith and miracles. And do we have to have faith to have miracles? When Jesus was performing miracles, he'd say, your faith has saved you. So we're going to go over that next week. Thanks.